Hey there, one too much. This is Let Me Ask You Something Again, responding to another one of your videos, responding to Debunking Evolution, part 1 of 20. I just really hope the next 19 parts that are every bit as riveting as this one, because I was just flabbergasted, because you claim it to be debunking evolution, yet nowhere in this video do you actually really provide anything that can be considered evidence to debunk evolution. It basically just comes back to the claim that there must be a God because it doesn't make any sense for there not to be. Anyway, you start talking a little bit about the cosmic egg, and so I guess might be an allusion to aliens seeding life on this planet. I guess I do see that as a more viable option than believing in a supernatural entity, but at the same time, these aliens, no matter how advanced they are, would have had to have come from somewhere. So to avoid infinite regress, they themselves, much like God, would have to be eternal and uncreated, or they would have had to have arisen through some sort of evolutionary process. And what would have started that evolutionary process? So really just attributing something to the supernatural as a way to avoid infinite regress. Now you move on and start saying something about intrinsic value and how I guess atheists, because they don't believe in God, don't think life has any intrinsic value. Again, that's just a misrepresentation of atheist positions. No atheists I've talked to have ever said that life doesn't have any value. It may not have, an ultimate meaning. It may not have an ultimate purpose as described, in the Bible or your choice of any other religious text. But that's not to say that, we're not all human beings with, big brains, the ability to speak and reason, and along with our opposable thumbs. I mean, that's what sets us apart from the animals. So there is intrinsic value to human life, and I don't understand why there's continually this claim that without God in our lives, atheists are just going to run out and kill and murder and do anything they want because they don't have any sort of moral compass. Anyway, on to evolution. You say that it hasn't happened in the last few thousand years, or we haven't seen it happen. Again, that's simply not the case. Now, this will get into something I'll talk about here in just a minute, but it seems like creationists want to see one species change directly into the next. They want to see some sort of, monkey giving birth to a human, or a dog mating with a cat and having a dog cat or something. I don't know. But anyway, life is still evolving. It's just like in the fossil record. Every fossil you find is going to be a transitional form. Whether or not that it's going to be right smack dab in the middle is another story. I mean, fossilization is rare. The fact that we have so many fossils is an amazing thing. But when you find fossil forms which were predicted to be found in a certain geographical location and in a certain strata, such as Tiktaalik, that clearly illustrate the transition between one species to another, they clearly shows a transitional form between fish and tetrapods. So if you haven't spent a lot of time looking up Tiktaalik, check them out. Fascinating stuff. But to get back to life still evolving, every act of sexual reproduction contributes to evolution. Every single act. So if you take every act of sexual reproduction and go back through thousands, if not millions, of generations, you're going to see these changes, because every time there's sexual reproduction, DNA it uncouples and then recouples, so it passes itself along, and mutations happen. Mistakes get made. If the mutation is beneficial to a particular organism in a particular environment, then chances are it will be selected for. If that mutation is just neutral, then it probably will stick around for a while. It may or may not. That's kind of one reason we see vestigial organisms and vestigial structures, is because they've just altered from their original intent, their original purpose, and they're just not used for that original purpose anymore. I mean, whether it be the human appendix or ostrich wings. Anyway, so if a mutation is neutral, again, it'll may or may not stick around. But if a mutation is harmful, chances are that organism will not live long enough to pass along its genes. And if you want to see examples of evolution happening today, just look up things like Nilanase, look up things like the peppered moth, look up things like Lemsky's E. coli experiments. All of these speak to evolution being true, which it is. It's a scientific fact. There's no debate in the scientific community about whether or not evolution is true. And I'll probably get back to this point in a minute too. but about scientists being somehow our priests. But there's no debate in the scientific community. Scientists dedicate their lives to facts and to sorting through all this, and they spend a great deal of time and effort in researching, conducting experiments, writing up their results. And nothing that they have found has pointed to evolution not being true. There may be debate about mechanisms, whether, that's one of the big things about Darwin. It's whether or not natural selection is the predominant force behind evolution or just one among many. So again, there may be controversy, again, about a particular finding, and that's another nice thing about science. It does correct itself. If a finding turns out to be crap, it's going to be exposed as crap, and no one's going to buy into it. That's exactly what we see happen with a lot of theories, which I think I'll talk about here in a minute. But to say there's no evidence for an old Earth, I mean, if you look at everything from like dendrochronology to like ice cores to carbon dating to radiometric dating to advances in astronomy, I mean, if we look out at the stars and we look at pictures from, say, the Hubble telescope, we see thousands of stars and galaxies that are many, many light years away. So for those to be created, in the one verse in the Bible where it kind of throws in, yeah, God made all the rest of the stars, I don't really see how that's a viable alternative to the empirical evidence that we have. And again, to say there's no evidence for evolution, it's called the fossil record. If you look up the fossil record, I mean, you can make a very, very clear phylogenetic tree and show where species diverge from one another based on common traits. It's what's called a nested hierarchy. And adding time does make it work. You make this frog to prince claim, which again I think sort of shows a fundamental misunderstanding of evolution. And then you go straight from that to this confetti analogy, like what are the chances of this happening? Now, there are some other videos out that deal with probability much more succinctly than people much more mathematically inclined than I. But you seem to be subscribing to what I call the lottery misanalogy, in that to win the jackpot, you need to have all the correct numbers in the right order at the same time. That was basically how you win the jackpot. Evolution doesn't work like that. Evolution, again, like I was talking about mutations, one mutation will stick, and then as that passes along, another mutation will come about. If it's beneficial, it'll stick, and eventually, yeah, all these mutations will add up, and coupled with many other things, such as gene drift and again natural selection, environmental forces and whatnot, we'll see new species arise. To say that evolution happens like this, that dropping all this confetti will bring up something else. I mean, it's like Hoyle's, what was it, the 747 gambit. What are the chances of a tornado blowing through a junkyard and building a 747? Again, that's been totally debunked. It's kind of akin to saying that a fish just hopped out of water one day and started breathing air, and that's how fish got out of the water, or that a monkey just gave birth to a human one day, and that's how humans came from monkeys. Fundamental misunderstanding of evolution. Now that being said, the people who still attribute divine or original authorship to God and are theistic evolutionists, I actually have more respect for than I do for literal biblical creationists. Because at least theistic evolutionists don't reject or ignore the overwhelming scientific evidence for evolution. We started talking about how there would be no fossils before Adam. So does that mean that every fossil we found is less than 6,000 years old, and that in the Garden of Eden there was everything from trilobites to dinosaurs to early proto-humans like Australopithecus to things like Neanderthals? And they said, what, they die off in the flood then? So we should see absolutely nothing. And then we should start seeing a very, very mixed strata that would have everything from tiny marine creatures to big dinosaurs to humans, along with human tools. We should see all of this commingled, but we don't. Nowhere on the planet do we see anything like this that would give any indication whatsoever of a global flood. I guess maybe these other things came about through genetic degeneration, which is another claim I've heard, that once sin entered the world, the genome starts deteriorating, people don't live as long, blah blah blah. Anyway.